who even cares about Animal Crossing on Switch? Totally isn't a game that people want to talk about. Animal Crossing is probably the last really big Nintendo franchise that we haven't covered on this channel, and that's for good reason. There's nothing really inherently flawed with the series yet. And don't take that the wrong way. By no means am I saying Animal Crossing games are perfect. No game is. Animal Crossing is just nailing the type of game that it wants to be. There's no game in its niche that's doing anything better than it. Also, it's not as old as a lot of games that we talk about here, so it's not in need of any crazy shakeup yet. With that being said, it's been less of a pressing issue for us to make a video about the changes they should make for Animal Crossing to be taken to the next level, because, well, I think Animal Crossing has organically been elevating just by the platform shifts it's experienced in its past. Switch in particular, I think, will be the perfect companion to how the series works and what it is fans of the series look for in the game. There are definitely games that different people prefer on certain system form factors. RPGs work great on handhelds. Big budget action games with crazy graphics work really well on big screen TVs on console. Then you have games like Animal Crossing. These games have a lot more bleed through than a lot of other games in the grand scheme of things. The passive nature of the gameplay, the time-based events, the fact that the game passive aggressively prods you to check in with your friends in town every day, all work well on a handheld console. The games are also about, buzzword warning, atmosphere and immersion, which, if you didn't hear it enough from some dude in a blazer at a conference or something, both work great on consoles. Also, I mean, who doesn't want to see a full Animal Crossing world that looks like the Mario Kart 8 course? Animal Crossing being on Switch will satiate all kinds of fans' desires in both of these departments, because as we all know, Switch can offer an all handheld experience, an all console experience, or how the cool kids play, somewhere in between. Although I'd say handheld mode in particular is still the way to play for most people most of the time with Animal Crossing. And the sales back me up on this. Animal Crossing has very quickly become a marquee Nintendo title and has 2 releases that have sold over 11 million units. To put that into context, Zelda only broke 10 million once. Zelda is a franchise that has been released on every Nintendo platform to date, except for Virtual Boy. But who is realistically counting that? I'm not, Nintendo's not, you're not. Wait, you are? Okay. Like, comment, subscribe. Moving on. All of that is to say, the bulk of those sales come from the handheld releases. In fact, Nintendo Wii, a platform with over 100 million users, is the only home console release to come close to reaching what I would call marquee Nintendo franchise territory. That doesn't mean 10 million units, by the way. I'd say over 5 million sales is the mark the big Nintendo titles should strive for. A somewhat understandable counterpoint to this, though, I think, is the fact that the Wii game is only technically the 4th Animal Crossing to be released, the 3rd to be released internationally. The series was still growing at this point. However, that would be discounting the massive success that was had by the DS release, Animal Crossing Wild World. That game is one of the, I repeat, 2 Animal Crossing games to cross 11 million units. The other game is the 3DS game, New Leaf. For Animal Crossing Switch in particular, I think it could succeed on the back of Nintendo Switch's home console capabilities, but at the end of the day, Animal Crossing is ultimately more important to get right on handheld. According to a 2013 Iwata Asked interview about Animal Crossing New Leaf, women between the ages of 18 and 24 are the largest demographic for Animal Crossing, which makes sense. According to a demographic study on video games, women mostly learn of new games to play through social interactions. Animal Crossing is very much so a game that's best played with a group, asymmetrically. Sharing tales of your town, trading items, and visiting each other's towns is a big part of Animal Crossing. Women being primarily into this game makes a ton of sense to me with that study in mind. And that new demographic, being women 18 to 24, is huge to have for Switch. We talk a lot about the Switch's potential to really take off a lot on this channel. The natural inclination for most gamers is to assume the games that matter most are the ones that resonate with a different demographic, males from, I'd say, what, 13 to 24. Games like the Marios, the Pokemon, the Smash Bros is... And yes, they're right. Partially. Those games matter if you want to be a successful gaming platform, but if you want to be a successful entertainment platform, you need to win over more demographics than just the types of people that would buy a Nintendo Switch just to play Breath of the Wild. Those people like myself and likely many of you, are part of phase 1. Definitely important to have for a platform, but the next phases is what really gets a console to take off. Of course, it's important to satiate phase 1 owners, and that's what games like Smash Bros are for. But ultimately, the goal going forward needs to be expansion. That's why we're getting Labo this month. Winning over the kids market is huge, but I think even more important for the games industry as a whole is the market that Animal Crossing speaks to. Winning over underserved markets is a great expansion tactic that I believe will be key to the bulk of Nintendo Switch's success, especially later in its life when the price gets in the impulse buy territory. 2 years into 3DS's life, after its admittedly early price drop, it was in a price range that is pretty easy to swallow, even when just spending that money on a platform to play just one game. Beyond that, the door is now open to upsell them on more games along the same lines. And just like I talked about in my video about Bayonetta and Pokemon, Animal Crossing is another game that will embolden developers to bring more games to the platform to appeal to that new demographic. For example, I can see more developers seeking to create games in the most popular genres for the newly, now better served, young adult women demographic. Specifically, also according to that same study, more strategy, action adventure, and arcade games. Not that there's necessarily a shortage of any of those on Switch relative to any other platform, but I'm sure you get the point. The more demographics a platform represents, the better chance we'll have at a diverse library of games on the Switch. For this to happen, Animal Crossing on Switch needs to take the series even further in terms of gameplay to maximize its sales potential. So here's some ideas to naturally improve Animal Crossing. As I said, the current games haven't really been around long enough to get stale like many other Nintendo franchises we've talked about here, so the basic idea could remain completely untouched. That, of course, doesn't mean there's nothing to speculate about, first of which being the plot. What will the theme be? I think I have an idea, but feel free to leave your own in the comments as well. Also, while you're down there, be sure to subscribe, maybe click the bell, please and thank you. Okay, moving on. Anyway, my thinking is that the Switch Animal Crossing game will want to be thematically in line with Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, since Nintendo has been big on the idea that their mobile games will connect with their Switch releases in one way or another. Maybe you can send your Switch character to your Pocket Camp to get some special items on Switch or vice versa. And while I'm on the character topic, Nintendo would be smart to allow us to use our Mii's appearance as a foundation for our Animal Crossing character. I know that in New Leaf you can get a Mii mask, so maybe don't go full on Mii if they plan on keeping that around for some reason, but at the very least, hair and skin color being influenced by a Mii's appearance would allow for different skin tones without tanning and more suitable hair for more people. Stuff like that. This game could also stand to learn a thing or two from the Mii Sim games Nintendo has made, Tomodachi Life and Miitopia. Those games allow you to give a personality to your character, and as a result, interactions feel a lot more personable in my opinion. It could allow for some really funny situations if all characters had that level of depth in their character. To return to the theme of the game itself, there's really a few ways they could go about it. Really, they can go anywhere, but I think that the two distinct possibilities is one being a camp counselor to tie in with Pocket Camp just on a bigger scale, or they could just scale up from New Leaf and make us the president of a bigger world. But something tells me they'll take a complete detour and make us be something else, like a park ranger. But again, my money's probably on a camp counselor if they really want to tie it in. I'd be down with being president though. I think I prefer that out of all the options because in my opinion, the things like town ordinances and New Leaf were pretty cool, but at the end of the day, I'd be open to a completely different concept as well. Another pretty important part of Animal Crossing that I think should get a small addition is multiplayer. Currently, you could play with your friends over Wi-Fi and local wireless. How about for Switch, we have the option for a straight up split screen situation? Of course, split screen isn't ideal, but for a lot of people, sharing a village with a family member or roommate is part of the experience. Being able to jump into the same world on the same console simultaneously, I think could add a lot lot to that way of playing the game. Also, for online multiplayer, what if Nintendo brought back voice chat for the people that care about that sort of thing? Animal Crossing on Wii was the first game to support that feature with the Wii Speak mic after all. I think it'd be fitting to have an on-system voice chat system on this game as well. In addition to that, I think it'd be cool if worlds were more interconnected in some way. Maybe have a separate stock market from your in-game stock market that's tied to your online friends, kind of like GTA 5. Or to touch on the MeSim point from a little bit ago again, why not randomly source personality types from people in a player's Switch friends list? It's not uncommon to have friends on your list that you rarely, if ever, interact with, so having animals in your world based on their character traits could potentially be a fun way to include them in your world, without it feeling super obvious or intrusive. And you know what? Let me declare a war on Loganstown while online. I can recruit an army of villagers I hate and don't care if they leave my village forever or not. Sound good? No? Okay, fine. A guy can try. Obviously, that last thing was a joke, but I do think adding more things to do online, even if they're passive things, would be smart to add, not only to this game, but every Switch game. We do have Switch Online on the horizon and all, which brings me to the last thing I want to talk about. Speaking of on the horizon and all of that, when will this game come out? Well, I can say I don't think we need it this year, but having it later this year would line up the gap between Pocket Camp and the Switch release with the gap between Mario Run and the Odyssey release. I mean, that correlation wouldn't necessarily mean anything, just a thought. Speaking of which, but those are my thoughts. What do you think? Is Animal Crossing Switch going to perform well? Maybe change the landscape of the Switch? Or is it going to fall flat on its face and just be a typical game? Let me know in the comments. I want to know what you think. And while you're down there, like the video, share it with a friend that's maybe really into Animal Crossing, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for more videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, one last thing, I'm going to be at PAX East, so if you're going, I'll be there, Friday, Saturday, and early Sunday. So if you see me, say hi. Okay, that's it for me. See you next week.